Welcome, everyone. I want to go ahead and get started with our prussic acid-free webinar this afternoon. Want to thank everybody for attending today. I see that there's a few more attendees coming in every minute here, so we'll take up a little bit of time here with a little bit of housekeeping. But nonetheless, this webinar will be recorded, so if you know someone who had registered that maybe didn't make it, we will make it available on S&W's YouTube channel after the fact. A couple other housekeeping things real quick. Because of the webinar settings, the only way you'll be able to answer questions is you should see a Q&A box. You could raise your hand and let us know you've got a question or something, but you will have to type. We've got a fairly large group. You will have to type in your questions, and so we will answer them that way. We do want to make sure that we've got plenty of time to answer questions at the end. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And one of the first things I want to do is introduce a very special guest we have today, and that's Dr. Mitch Tuinstra. Dr. Tuinstra is a professor of plant breeding and genetics at Purdue University. He's also, as you can see here, the Wickersham Chair of Excellence in Ag Research, as well as a scientific director for the Institute for Plant Sciences. Mitch, I stole your headshot off of your faculty page at Purdue, but I felt the lower left picture was more indicative of the Mitch I know. So I want to say welcome, and I'm glad you're here today.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to you, Scott, for inviting me to come chat with the group. This is a topic that I feel really passionately about. I'm excited to chat and to hopefully have a little bit of dialogue around what do people think, what kind of questions can I help answer, and also what do people think about what the value proposition and what the opportunity might be for prussic acid-free sorghum.
You bet. Yep. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. And Dr. Tuinstra's role, Mitch's role, will become more obvious here in a minute. But I think the reason we're here is prussic acid, the presence of Durin, has been a challenge with sorghum as long as people have been trying to use it as an animal feed, or as long as we've known this problem exists. And of course, Durin is a precursor to prussic acid. What we refer to as prussic acid. Durinase, which is the enzyme that is required to convert the Durin into the prussic acid, or HCN, are separated in the leaf during most of the life of the plant. And until you have an event where the leaf is damaged in some way, and that can be drought or frost are the ones we're most aware of. It actually occurs when you cut it, but in most cases with dry hay, if that occurs, it's a gas, so the prussic acid dissipates. So, we think about trampling and chewing and all these other things, but for the most part, where we think about prussic acid being a real challenge in grazing sorghum sedan grasses or any sorghum species, is when we have a frost or when we have a drought event. If you're not aware of what happens or how prussic acid poisoning affects the animal and how it occurs, it interferes with the ability of the blood to carry oxygen. Death from prussic acid can be pretty rapid. I have seen videos of animals dying from this, and it's not something you want to go search out and watch. It's not fun at all. But nonetheless, it happens pretty quickly, can happen pretty quickly depending on the size of the animal, the concentration of the cyanide gas that evolves. Tends to be more lethal in ruminants than simple stomached animals, although the horse people might argue with that a little bit. And I think that varies a little bit on the sources you read. But nonetheless, prussic acid has been a real challenge in sorghum for a lot of years. And so this is where Dr. Tuinstra comes in. I think the first conversation we had was in 2015. You sat next to me at an ASTA meeting and say, hey, I'm working on something I think you'd be interested in. And I was at Chromatin at the time, of course, took it back. We never really got any traction. We fast forward to S&W now purchasing the purchase of Chromatin 2019. Mitch comes back to us and said, "Remember when I talked to you about this thing I was working on? It's gotten a lot better." And so with that, I'm going to actually switch over to his slides and let him tell his story about how the prussic acid free trait and the commercial hybrids we're going to talk about here during the course of this webinar actually came about.
So I don't know if I first got to know Scott from when I was a professor at K-State. So this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And one of the things I really enjoyed about my opportunity working at K-State was the opportunity to interact with producers on a regular basis. I was on most of the fall field day tours, and so I had a chance to interact with people that had issues that they thought I could help them address. And so I slowly developed a list of things that I thought were important in terms of technology development for this crop, which really has an unusually well adapted qualities for dryland production, for folks that are interested or concerned about aquifers declining, less irrigation water. What opportunities are there for using this crop that's uniquely adapted to these drier environments? And one of the traits that caught my attention early on was prussic acid or durin production in sorghum. And the reason why it was interesting is because durin is a unique metabolite of sorghum. Can you forward me up one there, Scott?
Sure.
So sorghum is one. There's a lot of grass. There's a lot of plant species that are able to produce these metabolites called cyanogenic glucosides. These are sugars that have various kinds of complexities that have a cyanide moiety on them. And so plants accumulate them. A lot of times they're involved in controlling herbivory, and that's what the thought is in sorghum. So how do they control animal feeding, insect feeding? A lot of people thought it was key to the drought tolerance of sorghum, that this might be contributing to that role. But what was interesting about sorghum is that it's the only plant species that produces this particular cyanogenic glucoside called durin. And what's remarkable is the fact that we have a crop that's designed as a forage crop, and yet it still needs to be managed for this secondary metabolite that can cause death to animals by cyanosis. And so we began, I remember as clear as can be, I moved to Purdue, and in the fall of 2008, I was in Plant and Soils on a Friday afternoon, the Plant and Soils building where I work. About 5:30, I was walking down the hallway and I thought, I wonder if we can manipulate durin metabolism in sorghum. That'd be really interesting. Why don't you forward me up one slide, Scott? And the reason why it was an interesting question is this pathway on the right. I know that you guys, I don't want, this is the only pathway I'm going to show, so we don't have to get concerned that this is going to be an organic chemistry lesson. But the idea is we have this pathway starting with tyrosine, and there's a few enzymes, CYP79A1 and CYP71E1, and this UGT85B1, this glycosyl transferase, that produce this metabolite called durin. And then you can see it's a complex sugar with a cyanide moiety there shown. And then the durinase breaks it down to release HCN. So HCN. So what is prussic acid? Prussic acid is cyanide. That's why it's such a lethal. A molecule in terms of accumulation. But as I said, sorghum is actually the model species for studying cyanogenic glucoside metabolism. And I thought, boy, if we could just figure out a way to block that first enzyme, give me one click on the mouse there, Scott.
There you go.
If we could just block that enzyme, the CYP79A1, we could completely shut down this pathway and there'd be no durin production and no HCN production. So I was thinking about that for some time and thinking, boy, I wonder how would we do that? First, we started looking at naturally occurring sorghum varieties from all over the world, looking for variants that might be knocked out, and we weren't able to find any. Everything produced durin. So we began a project, we call it mutagenesis. We took sorghum seeds, treated them with a chemical that causes DNA damage, and when you damage the DNA, sometimes you damage the genes that are encoded. And it turns out that that first enzyme in the pathway, CYP79A1, there's a gene for that on chromosome 1. And what we were trying to do was to damage that particular gene to see if we could knock it out so that it no longer worked. And I was lucky at Purdue at the time. I was the primary advisor for the plant breeding and genetics program and the undergrad students. I had lots of them in my office, always asking for special projects. And I always said, I have a great project for you. Let's go to the greenhouse and screen for cyanide mutants. And so I had as many as 10 students at a time working in the greenhouse, looking through this mutant collection. And over a period of about 20 months, we looked through about 50,000 plants out of this population. Next slide. And what we found was there were occasionally plants that were not able to synthesize this metabolite, durin. And since they couldn't make durin, they weren't able to make prussic acid either. And after a little bit of careful manipulation and studying of the genes, we discovered that the first enzyme in the pathway, there was a mutation where it was a C493Y. That's those red amino acids that are shown there. There was just one really small mutation in the gene, and it completely killed the gene. The gene was no longer able to produce a enzyme that functioned. Consequently, no durin biosynthesis. Next slide. I think this is back to you. And so this then became really the defining moment. This was actually where I was at in 2014 at this ASTA meeting with Scott. I said, hey, Scott, we've knocked out durin biosynthesis. Isn't that an interesting concept? But since no one had ever described these kinds of mutants before, everybody had the same reaction, which was, is that good or is that bad? I don't know. Is it good or bad? And I'll be honest, I think Scott, he was too polite to say this, but I think he said something like, prove it. And that's what we went on to do for the next couple of years before we came back and said, I think we've got a product that looks really interesting and trying to move forward. And I think that's where we're at with this slide, Scott.
Yeah, we are. And so, yeah, when you came back to us in 2019, you had finished hybrids. You had been through several iterations on the parent line development, and that first hybrid that we looked at that, depending on, the people on here may have experienced some of it, was an extremely productive, very nice hybrid. We ran into some challenges being able to produce it. Funny story in that parents developed at Purdue University in humid, rainy Indiana really don't care for the high plains of West Texas when it's hot and dry. And so seed production became a bit of a challenge. So it took a couple iterations to get to where we are today with a commercial product ready to launch. But nonetheless, thanks for telling that story again, how you did it, because sometimes when we get asked the question about, is this a GMO or not? And you can see down here at the bottom of the features here, we've got it is a non-GMO, and that's because of the way you did it. So, I thought that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. I thought it would be really interesting for you to tell the story about how you did it. And it was just good old-fashioned labor. I mean, there was a lot of leaf punches collected over a long period of time by a bunch of undergrad workers. And so I thought that was a pretty unique way. I assumed early on, right, that first time we came to visit, I assumed you did some sort of, genetic analysis, and there was some searching in the computer, and somehow somebody found something somewhere and said, here it is. And you went and found that one plant or that one seed envelope full of seeds and went, here it is. But no, it was just kind of good old-fashioned hard work. So, well, what we want to talk about then is we're gonna have Mitch come back and tell another story here in a minute. But nonetheless, the PF trait, prussic acid-free trait, is how you can identify the products that'll be in the market. Right now, we have one, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But I want to talk a little bit about why this is important and why I'm sure why so many of you are on. It's a challenge. I mean, as Mitch mentioned, that when we get a frost or a drought, being able to graze the sorghum sedan grass that you have out in your field becomes a real problematic situation because you don't know. I mean, you can take some tests, and there's a good chance that the material you have out in the field is high in prussic acid. You can't graze it. So there's this peace of mind component of what do I do? I want to take some tests. I've got animals to manage. As I had a manager at a feedlot once tell me that these things have a bad habit of wanting to eat twice a day, and so therefore that need has to be met. The first time I thought about this was the time and labor savings piece. When do most of our frosts? Well, most of our frosts occur at a time of the year. They're in October in most places in the U.S. And they occur at a time when we're trying to do things like strip cotton, pick corn, plant wheat, and all of these kinds of operations that are really important. I grew up on what is primarily a grain farm in northeast Kansas. I always tell people there were two times of the year that your absence was not allowed, and that was spring planting and then fall, because we were either trying to harvest fall crops or plant wheat. Wheat harvest was in there too, but that was usually a pretty quick 5 or 6 days if things went well. But nonetheless, if you've got cattle grazing a sorghum sudan grass in the fall, and you're trying to do all of these other things, and there's a frost that night, you have to get up very early in the morning or maybe in the middle of the night, move animals. So that takes time, probably takes a good half a day to get them all moved. And now you have to care for them afterwards. And we'll touch on this a little bit later, but the time saving. The other one that has popped up, and we'll spend a little more time digging into this, is this extended grazing period. If you can leave them out there a little longer, what is that worth to you? And then, of course, the one that we'll get to here and again is animal preference. And this is kind of a neat one that sort of popped out with the trait. Well, to kind of prove the peace of mind point of the trait, this was some work that we did back in 2021. Of course, Idalou, Texas is near Lubbock, which is where our research and development program is. And we had a cold event. We thought it was a freeze. The overnight predictions was that it was going to be a freeze. So we gave it 4 days. The molecular lab team went out and sampled a bunch of the entries or things that we had in our yield trials, and came back and ran the fecal anger test. And we'll talk about this test later, but it's a real simple test. You take some blotter paper, you basically coat it or soak it in some chemical compounds and let it dry. Put your leaf sample in a tray, freeze it so that it's injured, put the blotter paper over the top, and if the cyanide gas evolves from the leaf, it reacts with the chemicals on the paper and turns blue. This has been around for a long, long time. And it is a little bit quantitative in that the darker the blue, the higher the cyanide concentration is. It's not perfect, but a lighter to darker is about as good as it gets. But nonetheless, as you see here, we had a bunch of conventional hybrids that are turning blue, and they sampled 4 different plants. All of the PF hybrids that we were testing at the time, completely nothing, blank. And you see the other conventional hybrids that are in there. The other thing to keep in mind is we didn't get clear to a freeze. I went and looked at the weather station that was close to our field. It was about a mile away, and it recorded a low of 33. And I think later on, we get to talking about a study that was done at Purdue in 2019. You started to see some prussic acid evolution at temperatures above freezing. And so we talk about a frost, but sometimes just near frost temperatures can cause the same challenges, because you do start to have cell damage at temperatures, even like this one at 33 degrees. So with prussic acid free, you have the peace of mind that the prussic acid is not going to appear in the growing plant in the fields you have it planted in. Of course, the time and labor savings already addressed that. Freeze events cause most of our prussic acid concerns. We do have, conditions where the drought occurs, and we wonder, at what point should we pull the animals off that the plants are getting drought stressed enough that the prussic acid evolution might occur. But most of the time, people think about a frost event causing this problem. And as I said, this is a time when we're already busy in the field doing other things. And the idea of having to spend time not only moving cattle the day it happened, or animals the day it happened, I always think of cattle, but it could be sheep or it could be goats, or anything that you would graze, that it's a problem. But once you move them, more than likely you move them somewhere else where you probably have to now think about water and feeding Even if you move them to, say, a cornfield of corn stalks, you've still got to now start hauling water and supplying water to the animals, depending on where it's at. So there's added time and labor that's involved because of the prussic acid potential that is alleviated with the PF trait. Now, I mentioned the extended grazing period. I'm not sure to who to give credit for this one to. We were having a conversation somewhere over the years of the evolution of this product, and it was probably somebody who has more of a grazing mentality than me. Said, yeah, and if it frosts and I don't have to remove the animals, I can keep grazing this until it stops growing or there's nothing to graze. And I was having this conversation with some growers in north central Iowa one time about this. I said, you know, if you think about it, if you get some moisture and it doesn't freeze hard enough to kill the sorghum plant, which is about like an alfalfa dormancy freeze, about a 28-degree freeze, I said, you can graze this thing for quite a period. And one of the growers said, yeah, that could be all the way to Christmas sometimes if we have an open fall. So this whole idea of an extended grazing period then started to work into our mind. And so with that in mind, we do a lot of work with John Holman and Scott Dooley at K-State. And so I asked them to do we entered, this product was in their trials, and I asked them to do a late harvest sometime around when the first frost occurs, just so we'd have an idea of what is out there, how much dry matter is out there, how much hay is out there, if you will. And so the top two lines here, they had 1.4 and 1.5 tons. I do know at this Belleville site, this harvest was done the day after a pretty significant freeze. So this would be the ideal situation of how much grazing material is out there, how much feed stuff is out there today, right at the time of the freeze. And for the commercial hybrid we're going to talk about here in a minute, SP 4408 PF, it was 1.5 tons. At Belleville, it was 1.4 at Garden City. I was looking back through the data at other places we tested this, and Gene Olson at Kentucky, and I had a conversation with Gene in January. He said, "Oh yeah, we always do a late harvest because I just want people to kind of have an understanding of what might be there for a winter grazing potential." And he does this with most of his summer annuals tests that he does. And so 2 years in a row, he had harvests in October, or in 23 at October. He had one in September in 24. He would have had another one in 24 after this, but his forage harvester broke down and he couldn't get to it. But nonetheless, if you take these numbers, and this is dry matter, you think about a 50% grazing efficiency. I pulled out the dry hay value from K-State's extension pubs of $80 a ton, and you can start to see the value of this extended grazing. I'll give John Holman some credit. I was having a conversation with him last summer about this technology, and he said, well, not only that, we can start grazing earlier in the summer. He said, we're always really concerned about grazing. We say wait to till the plant's 18 inches tall. And he said, we like to wait a little longer than that because I'm always worried about some of those tillers, those small tillers. And if we don't get a good stand, we might have more tillers than we expect. And we know those are high in prussic acid. So, there's an extension to the grazing season on both ends with this technology. I think the fall grazing period is one that more people will think about. But nonetheless, we've put some numbers to this to give this some validity. And so we know that every year and every location is going to be different. But nonetheless, I didn't expect Garden City, Kansas to have the yields that we saw in that final harvest. We did a survey of a bunch of growers back in January, and we asked them about this same question. How many days do you think you would get if you were able to keep grazing after your first freeze? And it was kind of interesting. These are the number of people who responded to the periods we gave them in terms of days. And the biggest group thought maybe it was 2 weeks to a month. And so, you can look at what a day of grazing is worth to you and add some economics to this. We've done that as well. But nonetheless, this fall grazing, extended grazing period may be something that many of us had not thought about as one of the benefits to this technology. Of course, the other one that popped up serendipitously with this product is one that's referred to as animal preference. And so to cover this one, I'm going to turn it back over to Mitch because this actually is a pretty interesting story how this was discovered. Oh, you're muted.
So our group was prototyping hybrids, looking at, what are the impacts of modifying during metabolism? Is there anything that we need to worry about? We were collecting data on performance and productivity, and was it possible to induce during production under different types of challenges, cold temperatures, droughts? We never saw any HCN release from these durin-free hybrids, so it appears to be a completely disrupted pathway. And I had a student. This is some work that came out of a student dissertation project. Her name is Shelby Gruss, was the one working on it. She's the forage specialist at Iowa State University now. She's been there a year and a half, I guess, maybe 2 years. And this was kind of when we first put this together, I was kind of a throwaway idea. It's like, yeah, sure, we can test this, but it's not, I don't really expect to see anything. I can't even see the difference between a prussic acid free hybrid and a normal hybrid just visually looking at them. And so I was thinking, come on, how are these animals going to tell the difference? Maybe they can tell. I don't know. Let's do the experiment. So we worked with our local forage specialist, Keith Johnson. I see he's on the call. He can jump in on any other animal science related questions related to this study. But we went up to the animal science farm. We went into a small pasture. We planted out these small plots of 3 conventional hybrids and a durin-free hybrid or a prussic acid-free hybrid. And this was in June, and that's normally I'm a sorghum breeder, so we get super busy in July and August. And so I went on vacation, and I said, okay, good luck. Why don't you take care of those animals? Don't let them, don't do anything bad. And then I went fishing. And while I was gone, I thought my crew was pulling my chain a little bit. They said, oh, Dr. Tuinstra, the sheep, they can really tell the difference. They're really grazing on the durin-free hybrid. And I'm like, they're just pulling my leg because we're kind of pretty lighthearted crew. And I just assumed they were pulling my chain, and they can't tell the difference. There's no way they can tell the difference because I can't see the difference. And so I was gone for 2 weeks, and they kept texting me and saying how amazing the experiment was. And I drove home on an afternoon about 4 o'clock, and I dropped my family off at home, and they said, where are you going? I said, I got to go to the animal science farm. I got to see what this experiment is. Is this serious or not? And the reason I put this picture in is this is the day that we released. This was a sheep feeding grazing study, preference study. And in this paddock, there are 6 sheep. And you can see them all in this picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this plot where the sheep are standing shoulder to shoulder is the durin-free hybrid. A little bit to the right, they're back in the conventional sorghum. A little bit to the left, they're back in the conventional sorghum, the prussic acid producing sorghum. But they knew they were standing shoulder to shoulder, almost like a cartoon, working their way across this plot, mowing it all the way to the ground almost. They were eating it all the way back to the stalks, down close to the ground. Go ahead, one more, Scott. And it wasn't just grazing, looking at the animals and how they were acting in the plots. This plot that has the flag is the durin-free hybrid. It's the same one that we were looking at just a minute ago. And it's very obvious where the preference of feeding was going on. They didn't just nip the leaves and eat the tenderest material. They ate the leaves, they ate the whorl, they started working their way down the stalks before they got into the conventional hybrids, which were left and right. And they were really barely grazed until the durin-free hybrids were mowed off. And so we knew that there was an animal preference component to this particular material. And so then we did now it became a question of, well, maybe this one is unusual. It's got sweet stems. It's extra tender, extra juicy, extra tasty. Maybe it's not durin. Maybe it's something else that's going on. And so we actually did an experiment where we created 2 genotypes that were exactly the same. One produces durin, the other not. And even when we had, in that particular scenario, there was no difference between the hybrids except that one was conventional, could produce durin and prussic acid, and the other not. And we saw very, very similar responses. It was clearly prussic acid was driving this preference, or the lack of prussic acid. And in fact, their ability to sense this suggests that it's actually as they eat the crop, as they're grazing, they can sense maybe some bitterness or some sweetness or something else is going on, because they're able to actively select and stay inside the boundaries of the plot, mowing off these particular hybrids. And the follow up on this was I remember talking to Scott. Oh yeah, this is extra. The animals can tell what this is. It appears to have greater palatability. And I know that the first time we sent seeds of these hybrids to Texas to S&W seed for evaluation, we had the same. We put a little experiment up at the agronomy farm, and we sent the exact same packets, exact same experiment. And 10 days later or 2 weeks later, they said, Mitch, there's something wrong with this material that you sent. It's just something wrong with it. It won't grow. I said, it won't grow. I said, here's the picture. I've got my plots. They're up a foot high already. They're beautiful. There's no discernible effect that I can see. No, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with it. Must be that it came from Indiana. Must be, some strange Boilermaker thing going on that it doesn't know how to grow in Texas. And then the funny part was about 10 days later, I got a call back, or I think it started with a text from Scott saying, I think we got it figured out. And he went on to share that this they didn't have a designed feeding study, but they did have this prussic acid free sorghum, just a few plots, just to observe what's going on with this material in the middle of their sorghum field. And the jackrabbits managed to find it. And the jackrabbits came in every night because there were only a few plants and mowed them off. They ignored everything else in the field and ran up to these plots because this is where they preferred their grazing.
Yeah. Yeah. As product development lead, it's one of these, I thought, oh, here we go. Here is the first challenge we're going to have with this technology, is that it's doesn't have any vigor. And then finally it was like, oh, the rabbits ate it. And then of course, the same thing happened to Krishna, who's at Texas Tech. They had the same thing happen when they planted a whole paddock of this stuff. They've done some grazing trials with it, published some work on it, and they had the same challenge last summer at Hayes, Kansas. They couldn't figure out why this one plot looked bad everywhere. Same thing. They went out and looked and noticed all the footprints and had to fence it off just so it would get a start. And we've had deer feeding and all kinds of things. And plus, we've also done the human taste test. If you actually taste the prussic acid free leaf and get a conventional hybrid leaf and taste them, it is less bitter. So this is real. This isn't something that's just a parlor trick. And a lot of people don't think a lot about this, but I always think about when I talk to people or I tell people about how buying decisions are made when it comes to sorghum sedan grasses. And we asked that question on our survey. And of course, yield is the number one thing that comes up. Now, how we measure yield in sorghum sedan grasses can be a little fuzzy. But the thing that comes immediately after yield is, will my animals eat it? I mean, there's nothing more discouraging than a pile of hay in the bottom of the feeding rack, or a bunch of sticks left in a bunk. And so this is one of those things that it's a bonus. They are going to like this stuff, and you're not going to have any problems getting them to eat it to the ground. They're really going to go after this stuff. So. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you, Mitch. Well, let's go ahead and move into the actual hybrid and some of the characteristics about it itself, and it'll actually answer the first question we got up, which was, what is the impact of the PF trait on yield and quality? Well, the first commercial hybrid that is out, we are shipping seed, got most of it shipped. We're working with a long list of centers of influence. I could get you the list or tell you the list of who all we have out in terms of like universities that are working on this. I'm not going to try to remember the list, simply because when you do that, you always leave somebody off. But SP4408PF is the name of the hybrid. It is a sorghum sedan grass. It is a headed type, and we get this asked a lot, headed or headless as your kind of your two choices in a sorghum sedan grass, and it is non-BMR. I'll talk about where we're headed here in a little bit, but it just worked out that this is the first female we've tried is a BMR female. However, the male that came out of our program is a conventional hybrid, and so that's why this one is non-BMR. But as you can see the product here in the picture on the left, and the way we do our demonstrations, and this is what Mitch was talking about, we'll plant 4 rows of every hybrid. And this was the type of plot where the rabbits were eating it all off, and we couldn't get it started. We've gotten, not sure whether, well, we moved. One of the reasons is we moved to a different location, and maybe there's not as many rabbits there. But here's the hybrid. We plant 4 rows. About August 1, we come in and just take the silage harvester, the forage harvester, and just cut the first 2 rows off. So this little shorter stuff you see in the front, this is, and in this particular picture, it's about 50 days of regrowth. This picture was taken probably the second full week of September, sometime around the 10th. And this was, the plot was, or these 2 rows were cut off in late July. So if I remember the math well, it's 50 or 52 days of regrowth. Here is the non-harvested, what it looks like in maturity, which, as I always tell people, we'll show you this picture, but if you're managing your sorghum sudan grass correctly, you should not see a field that looks completely mature with mature grain in it like this in the head. You should be cutting stuff much sooner than this. But nonetheless, wanted to show you what the hybrid itself looks like. Here's some pictures of some dairy animals, some dairy cattle, dry cows and replacement heifers grazing in Pennsylvania. You are going to see more of them at the end because we have some videos of of these animals grazing this several days after a freeze. And so one of the things that we have worked with our sales team over the last 2 years is developing basically things to help, technical marketing pieces, pictures and those kinds of things. And I gave them all the challenge last year. I said, I need pictures and or videos of animals grazing after a freeze. Okay. Because again, we have to prove this works. And we've done all the lab testing. We've done all the other things to prove it to ourselves. But the ultimate test is animals grazing. Well, one of the questions was asked that how's it yield? Well, here's the yields. In a trial last year, this was a total of 3 cuttings. Here's the SPF 4408 right here. Here's Sordan 79, which is our, basically it's a similar product. If you think about it, it's headed, it's non-BMR. It's our #1 selling sorghum sudan grass product. And so right here, the yields are very equal. We've not seen any yield drag. So we're pretty excited about that. I know a lot of times when you start working with traits, there's always the concern with yield drag. With our other traits, we found that it's not really necessarily the trait, it's more the genetics you put it in, is usually what you see often. The trait isn't typically the drag, it's how the product evolved. And in this case, of course, this female was developed by Mitch. The male was developed by our program, and it's one of our new products that we're bringing, or new parents we're bringing along. That's part of a refresh of our program. So pretty excited about the yields. Of course, we get questions about quality. There's Keith coming up again. There was a study done, or this was the preference study that we were just looking at with and there's the 3 other hybrids that Mitch was talking about. But here's some quality data to show that the Duran-free products, there was no impact on quality with the trait. 4408, this is from Rock Springs, Pennsylvania this past year. And again, you can see here quality above average, in the trial, certainly there in the top group. You can look at the numbers, do the visual inspection there. So crude proteins, ADF, NDF, and digestibility here. So again, we've not seen anything that would lead us to believe that there's any issues with forage quality. And there's, I know Shelby's got some other data in her dissertation. There was another study that was done, the 2021 cattle grazing study. There's some data there. And again, we have nothing that indicates that that's going to be a challenge. Mitch, you might want to address, I'll throw you a curve here. I know when we first met, you talked about how there was some concerns over nitrate concentrations If you take this much of a compound out of the plant, when you take the Durin out, what happens? How does the plant compensate? You might want to address that real quick.
So, Durin's not the only thing that farmers need to be worried about from a management perspective. There's also nitrates. And there was some discussion several years into Dr. Gruss's dissertation of, boy, we should really be looking at nitrate. With the nitrates wasn't the nitrate issue wasn't on our in our concern because we were so laser focused on Durin and prussic acid. And I said, oh boy, we should probably be checking nitrate levels. And so we did a little bit of backtracking on samples that we had stored, that we'd already had tested. And all of the work that we've done so far to date is that we don't see there doesn't appear to be any nitrogen relationship. Sure, these hybrids can accumulate nitrates like anything else, but they're not more inclined to be high in nitrates than anything else.
Yeah, and that was, I know, something you were concerned about and something you showed us early on. All right, well, a couple more slides here, and then we'll show you a quick video, and then we'll get to your questions. They're starting to stack up. That's good. I figured they would. Well, a little bit about the prussic acid-free or the PF pipeline. A BMR version is being tested. So we'll have that out in trials this year, and we'll report back. We'll know kind of the answer to that question November, December, depending on how quick we get data back as to whether that hybrid performs to the levels we think acceptable to be a commercial product. It's not enough that it exists. It has to be good enough to, to meet the standards we put forward for a commercial hybrid. Another thing we're working on, double team and prussic acid free stacked. And really what this is think of it as prussic acid free grain sorghum. There was a trial, that the grazing trial we were referring to in 2021. We're going out there for a field day. And as I'm flying out there, I'm looking out the window and I'm just kind of staring and thinking, I said, if we put prussic acid in a grain sorghum, that might be kind of interesting because there's a lot of grain sorghum that's grazed. Brent Bean is constantly talking about the benefits of the value of grazing grain sorghum stubble compared with corn stalks in the fall. So, get there, we go through the field day with the grazing trial. And of course, Mitch always asks, hey, you want to go look at some plots? And of course, I always say yes, we had time. And as we're driving over there, or we got over there, that's what it was. We got over there and you said, have you ever thought about putting this in a grain sorghum? And I said, yeah, I was thinking about that driving out here. And he goes, come here, let me show you. And he'd already, of course, as always, it always beat us to the punch in the thinking. He'd already started to create some hybrids, doing the test cross production, seed production piece for that. And so he shared some of the seed that he got from it. We planted out in Lubbock because we just wanted to know how this was going to work. Because of course, in a grain scenario, the bar is a lot higher in terms of what you have to do performance wise before you start adding other things. Well, that first year, those hybrids performed really well compared to our commercial checks and the things we put in. And so we got pretty excited. Payne Burks, our director of our breeding program and director of our R&D program, immediately started to work on that. And the first test crossed hybrids of coming out of our program will actually be tested in 2025. So I didn't put our pipeline slide up here, but we have an expectation that if everything goes as planned, we would have commercial hybrids potentially available in 2028. That's the usual evolution for us for hybrid development. Again, we got a long ways to go, but the proof of concept is there. And so you start thinking about that, that becomes a real systems change. You can plant grain sorghum, harvest the grain, and begin grazing immediately instead of having to wait or treat that grain sorghum residue, as we would call it, as a winter stockpiled feed stuff. You can start grazing it right away when it's green and still has a lot of quality in that. So we're pretty excited about that one as well. And just thinking about ways that we can take our technologies that we have and put it all together. Well, a couple of last slides I just want to hit on. We get asked a lot about, well, okay, if you've got a traded product, do I need to treat it any differently? As you saw from about slide 4, there's only one thing that was changed in this plant, this one mutation to make it prussic acid free. After that, it's sorghum. I was getting ready to say grain sorghum. It's sorghum and a Sudan grass cross. So nothing has changed, and so therefore the management you would use doesn't change. I put 20 to 35 pounds on the seeding rate. You know, I know it's lower than that in other places. Nitrogen applications. I hope you're doing a split application. That's been shown to be the way to improve your yields and your quality. Harvest timing, there's a lot of different ways people do it, but I put up one that's pretty straightforward for more of a hayed or grazed scenario. I know there's people that do a blend, but one of the things I really wanted to touch on is this. Um, More than 2,000 plant species can produce prussic acid. Well, we're not concerned about other things because they're probably not in your field. However, wild sorghum relatives can be a challenge, could be a challenge for you. Shattercane and Johnson grass could be a source of prussic acid in your field. So as you're adopting and this technology and putting it into your fields, or you're working with growers putting it into your fields, this is something you need to think about. You'll see a video later with the old cow sticking her head, her neck under the fence. If you got something in your field borders, that can be a risk to you that we have no control over. So again, that's something we want you to think about. The other one is something that Mitch just mentioned. The prussic acid free sorghum is still going to accumulate high nitrate levels under stress. Okay. And we all know that this can be dangerous. So this also needs to still be monitored. And this will all be, we've got all this in a technical guide that'll be available on the Safety Graze website that you'll see here in a minute. This is also going to be in the technology use agreement that we're going to ask you to sign for a handful of reasons. Two of the reasons are right here. We want to be able to communicate with you as users about these things to remind you that, hey, you still need to monitor other wild sorghum species in the field, and you still need to monitor your nitrate levels if you're dealing with a drought situation. As I mentioned, there's going to be a stewardship agreement with this. It's called the S&W Trait Technology Use Agreement. You can sign up for it, get it at agaccelerate.com. And this is largely for a couple of points. And I always tell people are, so why do I got to sign this? Kind of most people view this as only the technology big folks makes you sign this. I said, look, this is really about us being able to communicate with you. We have your email address. We have your address. We can mail you things. We can send you emails to remind you of this. We can keep in touch with you when new hybrids come out. So don't think of it as something as necessarily an agreement that binds you. Think of it as a way for us to have a relationship that we can communicate about these technologies. And so I'm going to go to the last slide here. And then again, this reinforces the fact that the four things you are going to get or people you work with are going to get from the prussic acid free trait or the PF trait is this peace of mind, the animal safety, the preference piece, the extended grazing window, and this reduction in time. We'll come back to a couple of slides here. I'll show you, I'm going to show you our sales team as the final piece here, but I do want to show you this video file here to show you this is about 2 minutes long, so we're not going to take a ton of your time.
But as I said earlier, this has been frosted on at least twice, if not 3 times in the last 7 days. Our last frost was Sunday evening, Sunday morning. You can see that the sorghum Sudan grass does look like it's been nipped a little bit. I'm going to conduct a field prussic acid test right here with a little home kit that I have, and I will share the results with you. Well, it's Wednesday afternoon, about 1 o'clock on October the 23rd, here on the King Farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And we turned these animals out. It's about 15 heifers and dry cows in here. We turned them out about an hour ago in this prussic acid-free sorghum Sudan patch. We've been grazing them right up this hill for the last week. We had a frost on Thursday, October the 17th, and that was last Thursday. And then we had a frost on Sunday, October the 20th. And you can see that these animals are really enjoying this crop. There's been no harm, no adverse effects. They come right in here, and you can see they're making very, very quick work of this sorghum sudan in about an hour now. And by this evening, they'll have it pretty well down to the ground like they grazed here yesterday. So they enjoy it. No adverse effects after at least 2 frosts. You can see along the edge of the field there where the frost did ding some of the leaves, and up here on the upper patch. And we're very, very pleased and happy with how palatable the crop is, how well they're eating it. So I hope you find this information in this video informative.
And so, yeah, a special shout out here to Dan Gard. That was Dan's voice you heard there. Dan's our district sales manager out in Pennsylvania. And I put NPF enthusiast. Dan has probably been as excited about this as anybody on our sales team because of what you saw there in terms of the impact that it'll have with grazing in that part of the world. All right. Stop share. Let's go back. I'm going to put, I'm just going to put this share back up real quick. So people, if they want to find where to buy this, and whoops, did that wrong. I want to do screens. Come on, we're running short of time. Screen one, there we go. And I wanted to put this next slide up in terms of if you need someone to contact, you can go to snw.com or sorghumpartners.com. And we're also just started our web page. It's called safetograze.com, where you'll be able to someday find this video, probably within, I should say this week, this video, as well as other information about the PF trait and prussic acid hybrids. And so with that, I want to get started on the questions and answers here. I think we answered a couple of them. There's one here, and Mitch, you can see them, right? You're muted. You want to address the one maybe on the absence of insect damage, susceptibility to insects? Do you want to go ahead and take that one? Because I know you've done some work on that one.
We actually have a paper that we developed in this project that Dr. Gruss, who's also on the call, and happy to, I'm not sure if she can jump in as well, but
yeah, I can give
one of the things about Durin accumulation is that it's typically accumulates in the youngest tissues of the plant. So small plants, new leaves as they're developing. And we actually were able to show that Durin-free sorghums were preferred not only by animals, but by insects, which shouldn't be surprising because Durin is there to deter insect herbivory. But the interesting thing about insect management in sorghum is that a lot of times sorghum seeds are treated with seed-borne insecticides in environments where insect pressure is expected. And those seed-borne insecticides provide control during that vegetative stages, or during those early vegetative stages. And so we've actually had hybrids planted all over, and we've had conventional and Durin-free sorghum hybrids side by side all across the country. I've actually never, we induced an insect outbreak, a fall armyworm outbreak in one of Dr. Gruss's research chapters in her dissertation, so we can measure it. But I've never noticed an insect outbreak on Durin-free sorghum in a field-based or a wider field-based scenario. And those were all non-insecticide treated plots, everything that we looked at. And I just assumed that in environments where insect pests were expected, that the farmer might be inclined to go with seed treatments. And in that scenario, those earliest stages of development would be protected by the insecticide.
Okay. I don't know if Shelby had anything she wanted to add. I gave her access to talk.
No, basically just what Dr. Tuinstra had mentioned. We purposely infested those plants, and so we did see that interaction there, but in any of the field trials we saw, we did not have a moment where we saw the prussic acid free being infested more than any of the others in those situations. So you can measure it, but we did not see it, and that kind of leads to those insecticides for those early stages and things when we see prussic acid production being high in the plants. So a lot of times we have that protection from those insecticides instead.
Okay. Perfect. I'm going to answer a few. I'm assuming everyone can see the answers. I'm going to answer a few of these just typing things in, but there is one that came up. Someone asked about, oh, here it is. We're going to get the prussic acid home test. Ward Labs, okay? Ward Labs in Kearney, Nebraska, wardlabs.com is, or it might be wardlab.com, but they did it. We were actually going to develop a set, had the same idea they had, and this summer, I can't remember if somebody sent me the link, but they had a YouTube video of their animal science specialist. I didn't look to see if she was on. Rebecca was on talking about their new test, and it's great. I mean, it's the fecal anger test like we talked about with the blotter paper. It's in a Ziploc bag. I have one laying over here. I should have had it set. And you go out and sample 20 leaves, tear them up, cut them up, whatever you want to do, mash them up so that you've got damaged leaf tissue. Put it in this Ziploc bag, close it. Their sheet says 20 minutes, and they're assuming probably that you're in August or September. I used it that morning. I sampled the stuff at Belleville that I showed you the yield from. It was a little cold, so it took more like an hour there inside, put it on the windshield where it was a little warmer. But nonetheless, they have a kit. They're fairly inexpensive. You can order them off their website. You can call them and order them. But again, Ward Labs is the one who had that. And I thought I had their link in here, but apparently I didn't. Let's see. The seeding rate one we can answer. As far as seeding rates go, just whatever you would normally use for sorghum sedan grasses. We typically say in drier environments, maybe 15 to 20 pounds to the acre. Obviously, we're thinking about most of the time it's planted with a grain drill or narrow seeded broadcast type thing. If you move farther east and yields increases, I've seen that go up to 30. I have heard of people planting as much as 50 pounds, and being in the seed business, we like to hear that, but I don't think you need to go that high. As far as accessing it, that's why I had that last slide up, and I can put it back up. Wanted to show you back to our sales team. If you need to get a hold of somebody to find prussic acid and pricing, our dealers would be the best way to go. It is limited this year. So if you call, not every dealer you call will have access to it. We have a limited amount. We're trying to get it out as many places as we can. But there are dealers, and it's spread out all over the U.S. in terms of where it will be. We looked this morning, we've got a little bit left, but nonetheless, I would encourage you to contact somebody on this list if you have an interest in this. And I know there's a couple of questions in here about this. Here's a good one that was asked. A good one for you. Well, I've got you, Mitch. In terms of the absence of Dern and drought tolerance, this is a subject that's come up before.
We've been, this was actually one of the bigger concerns I had the whole time during development is, oh no, you don't want to develop a sorghum hybrid that's uniquely adapted to hot and dry environments that's susceptible to drought. It's just a kind of a non-starter from a marketing perspective. And so we were watching, or we were looking at this potential interaction the entire time during development. And one of the chapters of Dr. Gruss's dissertation addressed this directly, where we were developing near isogenic lines and near isogenic hybrids to address the question of if we put these near isogenic, so two hybrids that are genetically very, very much alike, but differ in their ability to produce Durin, side by side under either controlled environment conditions or field conditions. And we tested and tested and tested, and I'm sorry to say this, Shelby, but that was one of the most boring chapters of your dissertation. We just did not see very much that indicated a concern. In fact, I felt very good after our work exploring whether there was a relationship between Durin and drought. There doesn't appear to be, at least in our hands. And that first year that we started sending grain sorghum hybrids to Texas, that was when we had some really excellent stay green hybrids that we had converted, and we had them in yield trials, in head-to-head trials with commercial products, and we didn't see any and really tough. I don't remember if that was 2022, I think, Scott, maybe 2023, where it was unusually hot and dry, and these products performed extremely well, very competitive.
Yeah, I don't know that we've seen anything that would lead us to believe that either in the testing we have done. So, okay, there was asked if there was a BMR hybrid being answered. Yep, we said that. Another one was related to dry matter intake. I might kick that back to you and Shelby, and if we need to put Keith on, we can. I don't recall if I recall the outcome from the 2021 grazing study, the amount of gain and the amount of dry matter consumed was pretty equal.
Shelby, you want to take that one? This is right in the middle of your area.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did not see any difference in gains overall between the two hybrids. Or in 2021, we did a comparison trial of basically animal performance and looking at stock or cattle gains over the summer. And we did not see any difference in gains between the Thurin or the prussic acid free hybrid that we were using compared to the commercial hybrid that we were comparing it to. I think the gains, if I can remember correctly, were right around 2 pounds per day overall. And so we did not see a decline in that. And then if that nutritive value data that Scott had just shown earlier, very similar across the board in comparison to our other hybrids. And so if we're looking at NDF, that's going to really control that dry matter intake ability. And it's very similar to our other hybrids. So very compatible and comparable to those that we were testing against.
Well, I've got one here that's kind of interesting. Looking at potential planting earlier in California, do you think it would recover from a short, mild frost if planted early? I pretty much with sorghum, like most grass plants, if the growing point's still below ground and it's just a frost, they typically, that's not a challenge. I mean, unless they're severely stressed for some other reason.
You wouldn't expect to see a difference between the prussic acid free and a conventional. If it kills the conventional, the prussic acid free is going to be in trouble. If it doesn't kill the conventional, I suspect the prussic acid free in most cases would be fine.
Yeah, I would agree. Oh, okay. We've got the Ward Labs. Somebody put it here. I don't know. I'm assuming everybody can see it, but if you go to their products, we've got a link here. I can forward it to everyone after the webinar. Like I said, I had it embedded in one of the videos, and then to shorten it up, I pulled it out. $20 for 3 tests, but it's on back order. So it looks like we've already swamped them in terms of how many they have. They're probably not expecting a lot of prussic acid tests to be needed in April and May or through the winter, but they'll get them to you. I have, like I said, we purchased some last year and used them pretty extensively. Question on irrigated seeding rate. Again, I'd go with that 30 pound per acre range on that one. Is there any issue with planting it over at 60 pounds to the acre? No, not at all. As I said, I'm in the seed business. I'm happy to hear that. I do not think there is any data out there that suggests that your yields will be better at 60 pounds versus 30 pounds. You might see some difference in quality because you've got a much finer stems. You've got it pretty heavy, and you would have to weigh the benefits of that extra 30 pounds of seed over that increase in quality. I think you're going to struggle to do that, but I don't have any data to really refute that. But as we look at data from other planting rate studies, that impact is not as large as we often think it is. That's not a question. That was just Jennifer Latsky. Jennifer Tucker was asking, has it been tested for sugarcane aphid tolerance? We have not. We have not tested it. And we don't have any experience with that yet. We haven't had it out. I think we will get some answers this year because we do have it all over Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, places where SCA is a real challenge. We did have it in, I'm trying to think, we had it in the trials in Georgia last year, but I don't know that they had an infestation. I do know that as part of our pipeline, what is coming is sorghum sedan grasses that have anthracnose tolerance and sugarcane aphid tolerance, high sugarcane aphid tolerance. Um, and so new generations will have that. I can't speak to these first two. My suspicion is the answer is no, because again, we haven't put the trait in it and we can screen for those, and had it, Wayne and Payne would have told me that, hey, we've got it. So um, without saying any more, that's where I'm going to leave that. Answer live. Let's see, what else do we have? $20. Okay, we got those two for that. I think we're kind of there. Let's see. That one we answered with the home test. Keith had to ask in here, has anyone tested if there's a smell difference? I don't know, Shelby, you may have the only data point on this one because it comes to your dog.
Okay. Yeah, my dog was very. I think she could tell a difference because she would walk straight through during producing plant, was sniffing around, and then got literally across the plot over and started chewing on the Durin free. So I would suspect there's got to be something just in the sense that when you talk about the rabbits and the deer that come in, they have to find the plot somehow. If there's an absence of smell, then how do they know it's there? An absence of something. So I feel like there's got to be some type of signal, but I have no idea.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like I said, I know the taste is there because I've experienced that myself. Let's see. There's one here that Dr. Mitch is the female CMS or GMS, and I think you can see that one. Do you want to go ahead and address that one?
The female it's a typical seed production system. So these are acytoplasm females. So they're ABR crosses that are used to make these hybrids.
And then one that's relative to the freeze, frost, wind chill, all of these things. Again, anything that damages cells will cause the prussic acid to be will develop in the plant and can be um, basically elucidated by the plant itself or produced by the plant, will cause that. So, wind chill is kind of a human thing. But again, if you get into low temperatures, you might even think about it as kind of that chilling temperatures where you're not quite to freezing, you're not seeing frost. Those might also cause it. We haven't done extensive testing on that, but have seen some things that indicate that you start to see the prussic acid to evolve prior to it actually freezing. And keep in mind, a frost can occur above 32. So depending on the scenarios. And then one last one I think we've got here. Answer live, done. Will be licensed out to other companies and suppliers. The answer to that is yes. And so that's why I like to point out that if you are looking for a prussic acid free hybrid, and this year it'll be a pretty more seeing it in the field or at one of our demonstrations might be where you see it. But in terms of next year when there's more available and someone else's may not be in a Sorghum Partners or an S&W branded bag, look for the PF. That's why it is SP 4408-PF, and anyone else who sells it will be required. We will require them to put that PF on the end of the name so that it's easy for you to identify. Any research on nematode reduction? Well, I don't know that we probably don't need to do any. We might. I mean, I shouldn't think I know the answer, but largely it's always been assumed that it is the Durin in the roots that is the thing that provides the nematode control that we see in sorghum sedan grasses. I mean, that's kind of always been the scientific thought there. So would be worth looking at. We have not done that. This hybrid's new enough. We haven't done any of those trials in a long time. We did some carrot studies way back in 2016 or 17. So it may be time to look at that again. But I my presumption is that it's going to have the opposite effect. It's not going to have an impact on nematodes. And then plot seed available for ground truthing. I'd say the same thing with or if you're looking for seed, contact somebody on this list here that I've got up on the screen. That's one of the reasons I put it up there, because the local district sales managers, they will have a better feel for what is available. If you small plot needs, say with the university of something, contact me. You can get a hold of me. You can go to the Safe to Graze, the S&W site, any site. I don't have my contact information up here, and I guess I can't put it in the chat because there's no chat, but nonetheless, you can find me at Staggenborg at swseedcode.com. And if you can't remember that, just go to the S&W website, and there's a put in your contact us. There's a place to put in your information and ask a question, and we'll get back to you. We do have some plot seed, small 10-pound bags that would be available for testing. So with that, I think we've gone through all the questions. We've gone a few minutes over. Mitch, you and I talked more than we thought we would. Not shocked by that. Appreciate Shelby jumping on and providing some commentary to some of the things we've seen. And I want to thank everyone who came today. It was a good turnout, and I think we did a lot to help answer people's questions. So we're going to say thanks to everyone. And Mitch, Shelby, thank you for coming on and helping provide some of the background information on how this trait was developed. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.